This video is sponsored by Tokyo Treat and Sakurako. You know, for a good amount of time on this page, I was like, I'm only really gonna talk about shows that are either currently ongoing or like just very recently stopped. But this morning I saw a TikTok of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood and I was like, oh, that was like the greatest anime ever made. And then as I got to thinking more about Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, I was like, oh, it was also like really complicated. And honestly, I would say that's one of the biggest foibles of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, to which from now on, I'm just gonna refer to as fmab. fmab was what, 65 episodes long, but we're introduced to an incredibly rich history, story, and power system. However, because of this condensed timeline, some of these incredibly cool aspects didn't get fleshed out as well as a lot of us hoped they would. And while in the manga and subsequent other literature, these things are better fleshed out, the majority of people don't understand some of the most important aspects of fmab. And I genuinely believe there's no circumstance greater than that than alchemy. See, alchemy is quite literally the backbone of fmab. It's its entire power system. And while the majority of people understand things like the law of equivalent exchange, or the fact that you can't bring humans back to life, a lot of people don't understand the history of alchemy, how it's a combination of science and mysticism, where the power of alchemy comes from, its true limits, how its powers can be boosted, how its powers can be negated, and what one needs to be to truly achieve the greatest heights of alchemy. And there is a lot of information on alchemy. It's way more than just the law of equivalent exchange and not bringing humans back to life. It is arguably one of the most fully fleshed out power systems in anime, and the fact that a lot of people who have consumed Fullmetal don't fully understand it is a crime. So today, we're doing Alchemy Explained. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Before we get into all that, guys, today we have one of our favorite reoccurring sponsors to the page, Tokyo Treat and Sakurako. If you guys don't already know, Tokyo Treat and Sakurako are monthly snack subscription boxes from Japan. Every month's box comes with a theme, and this month's theme is Snacking New Year. The Tokyo Treat snack box allows you to tap into what might be trendy or popular with younger communities in Japan right now. So you'll get to snack like a modern Japanese snack connoisseur. But both I and Tokyo Treat understand that opening a box like this might be a little bit intimidating to those of you who don't speak Japanese, as packaging like this really doesn't tell us English speakers what we're looking at here. But fortunately for us, every box of Sakurako or Tokyo Treat comes with a 24-page pamphlet telling us all about the snacks we've been given. And from this 24-page pamphlet, I've been able to figure out that these are Koiki and Nori salt chips. But I don't just find out the name, I also find out common allergens that might be associated with this and the history of this snack and how it pertains to Japan. But enough semantics, let's get to trying it. It's perfectly salty, the chip is dense, it's got great crack to it. In terms of potato chip thickness, it's perfect. But we also got a second box, Sakurako, which just like Tokyo Treat, every month comes with a theme. And this month's theme is New Year's in Niigata. Sakurako focuses on more traditional and artisanal snacks handmade by artisans in Japan. They give you a look into how a traditional Japanese household would snack around this time. On top of that, unlike Tokyo Treat, every single box comes with one piece of tableware, with this month's being this sake cup. But just like with Tokyo Treat, when you open this box, you might be a little confused or even intimidated. You see something like this and you have no idea what you're looking at. So once again, we consult our pamphlet. And from that, we find out it's actually a strawberry crepe, but let's try it. Down the hatch. Oh my goodness. It's so spongy and fresh and the cream is light and rich and tastes just like strawberries. This could have been made this morning. So what are you guys waiting for? Use code TWC for $5 off your first order from Sakurako or Tokyo Treat. And if you go through the links in my description and order a subscription before January 31st, you'll be entered in a raffle to win 2 free tickets to Japan. So what are you guys waiting for? It's about time you start snacking like a weeb. Now, usually with a video like this, I would say let's start this video off in the way that we tend to start these videos off, at the beginning, and tell you about the origins of alchemy. However, the origins of alchemy are a bit complicated, and the origins of alchemy also differ depending on what source material you're looking at. And since the origins of alchemy are a bit hazy and also a bit complicated, I believe it's best to build out what alchemy is for you so we can tie it into its origins later with a better understanding. So let's start this video off in the way that we start some of our videos off, by answering the easy questions. What is alchemy? Well, alchemy is an ancient practice that's been passed down down through hundreds of years of generations. Alchemy, as it is in the real world, is as much science as it is mysticism. So while there's things that toe the line of being scientific, like the law of equivalent exchange, there's equally as many things in regards to alchemy that look closer to mysticism than science itself. And with this combination of mysticism and science, an alchemist is able to alter the shape of Earth using natural energy. What this natural energy is something we'll talk about when we talk about the origins of alchemy. When an alchemist changes something into something else, it's referred to as transmutation. But one doesn't simply place their hands on the ground and make a spear out of the ground. There's multiple steps that go into creating transmutation. Specifically, there's 3 steps that go into any alchemical practice. The first is comprehension. See, this is where the science comes in. In order to turn something into something else, you have to understand what you're changing chemically, mechanically, molecularly. Let's say I wanted to transmute this pencil. I would have to understand this pencil on a molecular level, but it's more than just understanding what makes this pencil. I also have to understand the potential and possible kinetic energy tied to this object. See, this pencil, while technically just the pencil, currently does have potential energy, and that would be because it's in the air. Now, if I were to drop that pencil, that potential energy would turn into kinetic energy as gravity pulled that pencil down towards the ground. Now, the capacity of this pencil to have either potential or kinetic energy is not that high. It's a pencil. But let's say hypothetically, this super glue that I use to fix my statues whenever I'm an idiot was, instead of filled with super glue, filled with dynamite. Well, the mass wouldn't be any different, and therefore the potential and possible kinetic energy of dropping this wouldn't be any different. By understanding molecularly that this is made of an incredibly, possibly exothermic reactive material, would allow me to better understand the true possibility of this thing's kinetic energy. We're gonna be talking a lot of science, by the way, today, so very excited. So a large part of alchemy is understanding the shape and size of these two things. It's also about understanding what you can do with these two things. After you fully understand what it is you're working with, you have to deconstruct it in the second step known as deconstruction. And this is the first part of the process that requires energy input. See, this pencil is solid, which means all of the molecules in there are very tightly packed and therefore cannot be bent or repurposed. By inputting energy into this pencil, you would be able to loosen up these bonds and make this pencil into a more malleable substance. Upon making this pencil into a more malleable goop-like substance, you're able to reconstitute the molecules that make this pencil into something else. And that would be the third and final step known as reconstruction. Reconstruction, just like deconstruction, also requires the input of energy, because now we have to bring these molecules back together, but in different places. But when it comes down to it, just understanding these 3 steps isn't really enough. While studying chemistry and ancient alchemical theory is nice and will help you down the line, talent also very much comes into play. There are those who are born with a talent for alchemy and those who aren't. And while those who aren't can study a bunch and master chemistry and ancient alchemical theory, they will truly never be as talented in alchemy as those who are simply born with talent for it. However, there is circumstances where those born with incredible talent for alchemy can't use alchemy. The best example of this would be Ed. What do I mean by that? Ed's an incredible alchemist. He's an incredible alchemist for the majority of FMAP. Well, we actually learned through Ed that alchemy is not only inherently tied to studying chemistry and alchemical theory, it's also tied to an extra-dimensional space. An extra-dimensional space where an entity called truth lives. And in essence, truth is kind of a god. And in this dimension where truth lives is the connection between humans in alchemy. See, every single human, or every single alchemist at least, has a gate in this dimension referred to as the Gate of Truth. And behind this gate is every single secret of alchemical practice. Essentially an endless library of alchemical information. Behind the very doors of the Gate of Truth, you could possibly find a way to bring a human back with alchemy. However, we saw when Ed sacrificed his Gate of Truth in order to save Al from the truth dimension, that Ed could no longer use alchemy. And this is the part of alchemy that ties into mysticism. While alchemy is about figuring out the molecular structure of this pencil, how to break it down and reform it using science, it's also inherently tied into mysticism through the Gate of Truth. But in order to give you a better understanding of what alchemy is at the highest level, we should break alchemy down into those 2 core components, science and mysticism. And as we stated earlier, the one thing that a lot of people understand about alchemy is equivalent exchange. God knows they say it enough times in the anime. See, the law of equivalent exchange is basically a roundabout reference to the laws of thermodynamics created by Newton. And one of those laws is that matter cannot be created nor destroy. Let's say hypothetically you lit this notebook on fire. You would say, oh, the matter of this notebook is being destroyed, isn't it? But in the combustion reaction that is lighting this notebook on fire, the components of this notebook are being converted into other matter. While this notebook may no longer be paper, it is now smoke and ash. Alchemists are beholden to this very rule. In order to obtain or create something, something of equal value must be used. However, that's kind of open-ended, and thus the law of equivalent exchange is actually split into two separate subsections. One is the thing we already talked about, the conservation of mass. You can only create something with this pencil with the same mass as this pencil. So even if hypothetically I was somehow able to stretch the components of this pencil to make a headset, this headset would be incredibly flimsy and would only weigh as much as this pencil. Think about it like this. You need 1 kilogram of materials to make 1 kilogram of parts. However, this isn't the only law cut under the umbrella of equivalent exchange. The other law outside of the conservation of mass is the law of natural providence, which states essentially that if you use one type of material, you can't change that type of material into an entirely different kind of material. But what does that mean? Best way to explain it is to talk about alchemy in the 4 basic elements: earth, fire, water, air. Let's say we're transmuting the earth. If we put our hands down on the ground to transmute the earth, we could make earth-type things. What do I mean by that? I mean hard, rigid objects, solids. We can't necessarily transmute the earth into water or air. While we could hypothetically transmute this earth into mud, let's say, or a loose fine dirt or a gravel, we can't make earth into water. In the same way we couldn't make water into earth. And this makes sense if you think about it, because the major components of, let's say, dirt are carbon and nitrogen and maybe a little bit of oxygen, while the key components of water are hydrogen and oxygen. We can break down structures molecularly, not subatomically, which means that while we can break the bonds between carbon in this pencil, it doesn't mean we can turn carbon into oxygen. But this is an anime world. Surely some people have tried to break the rule of equivalent exchange, right? And yes, they absolutely have, and it has detrimental consequences. See, what happens should somebody try to break the law of equivalent exchange is a rebound. You see, if hypothetically alchemy was purely scientific and created by humans, a rebound wouldn't be possible. If you tried to make a 2 kilogram spear out of 1 kilogram of steel, you would simply just get half a spear. But since alchemy is tied into mysticism and the power of the earth itself, rebounds can occur when an alchemist tries to stretch an element beyond what materials they have. When this happens, the equation is no longer 1 equals 1. The equation becomes 2 equals 1 or 3 equals 1, and that's a problem because inherently that goes against the laws of nature. And thus, let's say I'm trying to make, once again, a 2 kilogram spear out of this pencil. The problem then becomes that the 2 kilogram spear side of the equation significantly heavier than this pencil. But the problem is, in alchemy, technically both sides of this equation exist simultaneously. As it is technically all the same matter, and this is tied into mysticism and the power of the earth, that 2 kilogram spear will be created. But now matter that didn't once exist exists, and that's a problem. And thus, in order to even the scales, a rebound occurs. Now, what happens with a rebound is unpredictable. Usually the rebound is reflected upon the alchemist who's making the equation be unbalanced. And this rebound can result in mutations, serious injury, and more often than not, death. But once again, there's even more steps than just understanding chemistry, alchemical design, being talented, and understanding the law of equivalent exchange. Since this is about science as much as it is about mysticism, there's also another thing you need to do in order to use alchemy, and that is the creation of a transmutation circle. I don't know why I'm pointing at my hand. The only person who has it on their hands is Colonel Mustang. Now, a transmutation circle is necessary for any alchemist who wants to alchemize. Therefore, before an alchemist wants to use alchemy, they have to either draw using ink or blood or chalk, or have a permanently inscribed transmutation circle near them. And this is kind of tough when you consider the fact that a transmutation circle is anything but just a circle. See, transmutation circles can be a myriad of different things depending on what you want to make using said transmutation circle. When we saw Ed and Al create a transmutation circle to bring their mother back to life, the transmutation circle was incredibly complicated because what they were trying to transmute was incredibly complicated. And while not every single transmutation circle is this complicated, every single transmutation circle is comprised of 2 basic components. One is the circle aspect. See, the circle of a transmutation circle is meant to be representative of the continuous circle of energy on Earth. Essentially, this circle is a conduit that dictates the flow of power being drawn from the Earth to make alchemy possible. And since the energy of the Earth is cyclical, by having this circle, it makes that energy be manipulatable. Now, the second aspect is that within that circle, there's alchemical runes. And this is truly where transmutation circles differ from each other, and where understanding alchemical history, theory, and all of that comes into play for a talented alchemist. Now, while the majority of the time these runes are just triangles placed in different ways, the triangles or character-like runes that are put in this transmutation circle are chosen based on what's ever being converted to make it both as efficient and powerful as possible. So the runes chosen to transmute stone would be different from the runes chosen to transmute water. However, you don't necessarily need a transmutation circle to pull off alchemy. See, while a transmutation circle does help redirect the energy of the earth into a usable form, transmutation circles represent alchemy's most balanced form, giving alchemists who use transmutation circles the most balanced set of stats, essentially. A transmutation circle is just as good at deconstructing as it is reconstructing. However, if hypothetically, let's say you only really deconstruct things and you never really focus on reconstructing or vice versa, alchemists have been shown to use things like a transmutation array. See, the difference between a transmutation array and a transmutation circle is that a transmutation array isn't always circular. In fact, it's rarely circular. And while a transmutation array does usually move energy cyclically, it does a couple of other things differently. See, the cyclical part of a transmutation array is a very minor part in its purpose. See, a transmutation array differs from a transmutation circle because the runes within a transmutation array are not confined into the circle. And sometimes there's not even a circle at all in transmutation arrays. See, transmutation arrays are most commonly found on alchemists as tattoos or carvings. And the best example we've seen of a transmutation array on somebody is the transmutation array on Scar's right arm. It's highly implied that the non-cyclical nature of his transmutation array makes him better at the deconstruction process of alchemy. Since alchemy, if you are going to reconstruct something, is technically a circle. But should, hypothetically, you only want to destroy something using alchemy, it's not a cyclical process. And thus, Scar's transmutation array not having a circle might be a hint toward the fact that he's never really reconstructing anything, he's just destroying. So now that we understand how an alchemist uses alchemy and what alchemy is, we should talk about the reasonable limits of alchemy outside of equivalent exchange, obviously. Well, I guess it still technically ties into equivalent exchange, but in like a more metaphysical way. See, alchemy cannot bring the dead back to life. Since alchemy can usually only be done with non-living matter, converting non-living matter into living matter is impossible. This is because within the confines of alchemy, a soul is priceless. And thus, since a soul is priceless, there's technically no way to balance the scale of that equation. And while you can gather all of the materials of a human body, things like carbon, iron, sulfur, calcium, all those things, just having the components of a human body doesn't equate for the soul. And thus, since like we talked about earlier, an alchemical reaction has both states of the matter existing simultaneously, you can hypothetically make a body with alchemy. But since now the body side of the equation is tipped because the soul is priceless, this results in a rebound. When Ed and Al tried to bring their mother back to life, this rebound resulted in Al's entire body and Ed's leg being taken. Now, this rebound kind of has a set base of rules. The rebound, as in the parts that are taken by the initiators of the alchemical practice, is usually equal in weight to the human trying to be created. This is why Ed lost his leg and Alphonse lost his entire body, because that was roughly the mass of their mother. When Izumi Curtis tried to bring her dead child back to life, she lost a couple of her internal organs because that was the same weight as the baby she was trying to bring back to life. But just losing a couple of your body parts isn't where the trouble ends. Since alchemists who are trying to bring people back to life are essentially playing God, they have to now report to God. Any alchemist who tries to do human transmutation gets called to the gate of truth, where they have to talk to truth, also known as God. Now, should an alchemist get pulled through this gate of truth, they will become master alchemists, because every single secret of alchemy lies behind the gate of truth. However, in order to go through this gate of truth, you have to pay a pretty heavy toll. For most people, just like with human transportation, the toll is body parts. However, since the body parts taken by this rebound and heading through the gate of truth then reside in the gate of truth realm, and since the entire power of alchemy comes from this realm, humans who have body parts in this dimension don't need transmutation circles, because a transmutation circle is a way to tap into this realm to access the alchemical power of the metaphysical truth world. This is why Ed and Al are able to use alchemy without transmutation circles. Now, in the 2003 anime, it was actually possible to do human transformation. You were able to make homunculi with like a certain amount amount of thought processing ability with the components of a human, and it was implied with the power of a Philosopher's Stone, you would be able to bring a human soul back. But that all got retconned, so ignore it. However, just because you can't pull a soul from the dead and put it into a body and bring a human back to life doesn't mean that you can't use alchemy on human souls. See, you can use alchemy to bind human souls. While you can't technically make a human, you can kind of make a human. See, human soul binding is a type of alchemy. Specifically, a kind of alchemy where an alchemist will draw a runic circle on something and bind a human soul to said something. Now, this runic circle has to be painted with blood, and the item that the person is being bound to usually also has to be made of iron. It's said that the iron in the blood reacts to the iron object and is able to bring the human soul to inhabit said iron object. Now, this is usually a set of armor, like with Al, but genuinely any iron object will do. And so long as this blood rune remains on said iron object, the human soul will inhabit whatever iron object this blood rune is drawn on. Now, obviously, the soul put into this vessel can't eat, sleep, be hurt, enjoy anything really, but they're still around. However, this binding is technically temporary, as eventually the soul and the vessel will reject each other. On top of this, technically for this to work, the body of the person being sealed into a vessel still needs to be alive, because as time goes on, the soul in the vessel and the living body will be drawn towards each other. This is the reason why Al was able to inhabit the suit of armor for so long, because technically his body was still alive, just in the truth dimension, and because his body was in the truth dimension and Al was commonly using alchemy, he was sort of in contact with his own physical body. On top of that, really the only reason that this worked is because Ed was pulled through the gate of truth with Al, which means that there's a possibility that while being pulled through the gate of truth together, their souls intermingle, which would give Ed a greater domain over Al's soul in binding it to a suit of armor. On top of human soul binding, there's other ways to play with human souls that are frowned upon by alchemists as a whole, and that would be human chimerizing, essentially combining humans with other living beings to make a new type of chimera-like being. The best example we saw of this was Shao Tucker and his infinite pursuit to make dog girls. But in essence, by understanding the chemical makeup of a human and an animal, a practiced alchemist is able to blend the two components together to make a chimera. This is very illegal, even though the government has technically been doing it behind the shadows for years now. The Amestrian government, the government that Ed and Al work under. So yeah, don't do that. And that is basically everything you need to know about alchemy. But now that you have a full picture of what alchemy is, how it's pulled off, what makes it stronger, and what the limits of it are, now we can talk about the origins of alchemy. It's like with a lot of things in the Full Metal universe, the origins differ between the 2009 anime and the manga and the 2003 anime. Obviously, though, we're only going to be considering the 2009 anime and the manga. And in the manga, it was stated that alchemy was taught to the Amestrians 350 years prior to the start of the manga by a man by the name of the Philosopher from the East. And it was from this philosopher from the East that the Amestrians learned that alchemy is the process of harnessing the power of Earth's tectonic plates shifting and going on top of each other. To break that down, thousands of feet below where you're standing currently are a thing all across the world referred to as tectonic plates. See, while the Earth is a circle, it's a composition of shifting, moving plates. And these shifting and moving plates sometimes ram into each other. When these shifting and moving plates ram into each other, they either just bump into each other, or one shifts on top, or they both shift up. And this is how every single mountain you've ever seen on Earth was created. The shifting of these tectonic plates, when they shift up, shoots the crust of the Earth up into a spike and creates mountains. This is referred to as diastrophic energy. So in essence, by harnessing this power of these tectonic plates, alchemists are able to convert that energy into alchemy. At least that's what Amestrians were told. See, alchemy is actually only practiced in Amestria. In the country of Xing, they use a thing by the name of alchemy, which they say draws on the power of the dragon's pulse. In essence, they use the cycling chi of the world to feed their alchemy. And thus the circles they draw aren't actually referred to as transmutation circles, but purification circles, since they focus on a much more benign and natural version of energy on Earth, which makes alchemy better for healing people than alchemy. But because those who practice alchemy from the country of Xing don't practice alchemy, they can sense that alchemy is not actually deriving its power from the shifting of tectonic plates. And it's actually revealed significantly later in the show and in the manga that while the power source of these tectonic plate shifting does exist, and it does play into alchemy a little bit, the real way Amestrians have been accomplishing such high-level alchemy is not through this source alone. In fact, the way that Amestrians have been accomplishing alchemy is through the power of the Philosopher's Stone, and that in reality, all throughout Amestria, there are tubes that tap into Father's body, which is under the earth. And these tubes dispense Father's energy and Philosopher's Stone energy. And since these tubes run up to the crust of the earth, they allow Amestrians to better tap into the power of the tectonic plates. So while alchemy does rely on the collision of these tectonic plates to fund the energy and make it cyclical and therefore manipulatable using transmutation circles, the level of alchemy that we've seen alchemists in Amestria use is only possible because of the Philosopher's Stone and Father. And while technically the 2003 anime basically stated that alchemy is almost entirely to do with the Door of Truth, we're ignoring that. So in summation, alchemy taps into the power of the earth, whether that be chi or shifting tectonic plates. It can be amped by proximity to a Philosopher's Stone, and that alchemy is the perfect blend of chemistry and metaphysical mysticism in the form of the Door of Truth. Should somebody destroy their Door of Truth, they can no longer use alchemy. Should somebody enter their Door of Truth, they can learn all the secrets of alchemy. If somebody destroys their Door of Truth, they also destroy technically their truth or their god. And human transmutation is impossible. And Xiao Tucker wasn't a bad guy. He was just trying to figure out how to make dog girls. And that's it. Everything you need to know about alchemy. Did you guys like this video? Do you want to hear me talk more about Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. You know what? Do you want cat girls or dog girls to be real? Yeah. Guess what? The scientific process mandates that there's gonna be a couple of Nina Tuckers before we get any Astolfos.